Okay, the remainder theorem. Well, your remainder is what you get after you do your dividing. You can find your remainder by doing your longhand division, or this is saying you can find your remainder by just plugging that value in, and that's exactly what we did in the last problem. Your factor theorem says when you go ahead and divide by an x minus c, it's going to be a factor if and only if your remainder is 0. We've talked about that before, but this is the book's notation of writing it. So here we want to go ahead and find our zeros by factoring. Find your zeros, you said equal to 0. There's no greatest common factor, so you're going to do just two parentheses side by side. Beginning of each parenthesis, you'll put x. And you want to think, okay, what numbers multiply together to give me 8, but yet add together to give me a negative 6? Then you have two things multiplied together to give you 0. So then you're going to set each one of these equal to 0. And set the next one equal to 0. And then you just solve each one. So then you get x to be a 2, or you get x to be a 4. On this problem, you're actually given the answers, and you want to work backwards to find the question. It's like a Jeopardy game. So it's just the reverse process of our last problem. Here's our last problem. We worked it out forwards, and we had all this work over here. So since we're working backwards, we got to start out with our last step before. So you want to go ahead and you want to set each one of your answers equal to x, because that's what we ended up with. Since we're working backwards, the next to the last step we had was we had these things equal to 0. So you want to set each one of these equal to 0. So you want to subtract your 2 from both sides. Here you want to get 0, so you have to add 1 to both sides. Here you'll need to get a 0, so you have to subtract 3 from each side. Now, over here, the two things that were set equal to 0 were really the two things that you ended up multiplying together. So, same type of thing. The things that are equal to 0 are the things that you're going to want to multiply together. So your first thing that's equal to 0, your second thing, your third thing. They're the ones that actually are going to multiply together to give you your original problem. So FOIL out the first two and you get this. Still haven't done anything to the third one. Then all we have to do is go ahead and multiply through here to be able to be finished. I'm assuming at this point you could go ahead and show all your work to be able to multiply it out, but here's the answer. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at another option that we have. That's synthetic division. Synthetic division is a second way to do our division. Now, with synthetic division, we're going back to that same problem we did before in two different ways. Now, what's in your parentheses is what x is. Whatever's in your parentheses here, that tells you what to put in your half box. Yes, we have a half box, but it's a different half box than we had before. What goes after your half box here to the right is just your coefficients of your function here. The 1, the negative 3, the 1 in front of your x, and just your 5. Now, with your synthetic division, you add down and you multiply. Those are the only two things you do in synthetic. So you add your 1 with what's underneath, which is nothing, so you get 1. You now want to take what's in your half box times what's in the bottom. That tells you what to put here. And then you repeat. You add this plus this. Then you got to multiply your 2 times what you just put on the bottom. Gives us our negative 2 that tells us what to put here. Then you add. Then you got to take what we put on the bottom and multiply. Tells you what to put under the 5. And then you add. So, what do you notice about your last number? What does this correspond to? It corresponds to your f of 2, or you may want to think of it as your remainder. What do the rest of these bottom numbers correspond to? They correspond to your coefficients of your quotient. And when we had done this problem with your longhand division before, we ended up getting this right here for your quotient. So that's your quotient. That's what these numbers right here correspond to. For this particular problem, I also wrote down our quotient and then went plus our remainder of 3 over our divisor. So, is 3 a zero of this function? Another way to phrase the question is f of 3 equal to 0? Well, there's multiple ways to do that. One of the ways is just to go ahead and plug in 3. One of the ways is to go ahead and divide it by an x minus 3 using longhand division. The third way we just looked at is with synthetic. So we're going to take what's in our parentheses, and that goes in our box. Remember, what goes after our half box is just our coefficients. Once again, if you happen to be missing any of these, you'd have to put 0 in there as a placeholder. Once again, you add down, multiply these two numbers, tells you what to put there. Then you add down, then you multiply, tells you what to put here. Then you add down, then you take your 1 times your 3, tells you what to put here. Then you add down, and in this case we get 0. The last number is your remainder. It's also what you get when you plug in 3. So, is 3 a 0? Yes, because you got a remainder of 0. So, is your x minus 3 a factor of this? Well, remember we had said x minus 3 in doing longhand division is another way to do this problem here as it is with your synthetic. Well, we know we get a remainder of 0, so if it's get a remainder of 0, yes, you know it's a factor. In the middle half of page 264 in your book, you'll find some more information you'll want to go ahead and read.